Welcome, beautiful souls, to our next episode of Tea at the Temple. And have we got the most beautiful guest for you? Today, joining us is the gorgeous Lisa Bosworth, Blue Rose Oracle. And honestly, you are in for such a treat.
Seriously, she has no idea the majesty of her being. She is a quantum priestess. She would never phrase herself as that, but she absolutely is. She's a walker of time. She's a speaker of truths. She's a healer of heart spaces. She is bloody incredible. So go and grab yourself a brew and tune in for this week's episode of Tea at the Temple.
Yeah, you may need a journal for this one. There is lots of notes to take away. Enjoy.
Absolutely.
Oh, beautiful Lisa, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our next episode of Tea at the Temple. Rachel and I have been dying to come into soulful conversation with you, and the time is now. So welcome, beautiful soul.
Oh, thank you. And I'm just really happy to be here, really humbled, really grateful. So it's really nice to be in connection with you at the temple. So thank you.
Thank you, darling, for joining us. So with all of our guests who are new to the Tea at the Temple, we always like to ask and start with the question, what brought you to the spiritual path?
Oh, exciting. I like that question. It's always been there. As a child, I saw lights, orbs in the room, colours around, people, fairies in the garden. It's always been there. I think it's been more of a practice of acceptance and self-acceptance, self-love, and not trying to mask who I was, but actually allow and receive who I was. So my spiritual journey has been more about that. It's been more about just allowing and receiving. I think initially, it was always there. I remember making my own tarot cards and oracle cards as a little girl, kind of drawing them and colouring them in, and finding any book in the library about anything esoteric, because we didn't really have the internet and there wasn't, access to the information we have now. So trying to understand what I was seeing and experiencing, finding a book that had anything slightly esoteric was like a goldmine of information for me. I just loved it. I connected with stones and rocks in the ground and crystals, talked to trees, all of that sort of thing, but did learn to kind of mask it a little bit, moving more from kind of primary school to secondary. It was kind of the awareness of it's not really acceptable to be out of the spiritual closet at that time. And especially when you're trying to make friends and build relationships with your peers and things like that. But I think progressively it was just there, and I remember finding a crystal shop when we were on holiday, and I was like, crystals, that's just it. They just sang to me, and it was trying to mask who I was, but also kind of develop more about who I was. I knew that I could feel things, see things, hear things. So it was trying to work with it, but not appear too out there and, try and fit in and those sort of things. I think when I got to my teenage years and things were a little bit more socially acceptable, so it's coming into the 90s and people are starting to, talk about energy and, you had like a bit of a dance thing that was going on. So people were starting to work with energy to understand it a bit more. So kind of feeling that emotion of love and understanding and empathy, people could understand it slightly more, I think. So moving into that, I think probably around my 20s when I learned aromatherapy and reflexology. I went into holistic therapy for a few years quite early on. And there wasn't really, it wasn't as big, there wasn't the boom as there is now. So it was something that I did alongside other jobs, but I was aware when I was working with clients that I would pick up versions of them from other lifetimes. And I was trying to kind of understand that, work with it whilst being present with the client, because it's an aromatherapy session or a reflexology session. So it was working and understanding what I was receiving and trusting and allowing it, whilst also kind of doing what the client was expecting for that session and treatment. But through that, I think everything got a bit more activated, and I kind of, through studying and working with essential oils, sacred plant medicine and flowers, and working with reflexology and the meridians, things like that, everything started to kind of activate a little bit more. So I went into teaching at a holistic school and learn and develop more. But I think everything was just expanding, but there wasn't the outlet, if you like, to kind of really step into who I was. So I kind of just thought at one point, I need to kind of walk away from this and get a proper job and, just go into corporate work. So I did that for a few years, but I was really unhappy, just wasn't me. So I think the journey for me, it's always been there, but it's been a balance of self acceptance, self love, authenticity. And even though I'd kind of dabbled by going into aromatherapy and holistic therapies and, I'm teaching it, it was about really coming out of the closet, I think, spiritually for me. That was the big, big journey. And with social media expanding, it came at a time when I was getting really back into meditation, getting back into more of a conscious practice and just self acceptance. And I think everything just expanded from there. It was almost like I was waiting for the internet and social media to really kind of connect with my soul family and really start to be who I truly was. So yeah, but it's been an ongoing process. It always is, isn't it? But yeah, it's always been there. It was there when I was a child, like orbs in the room and, seeing the colours and the fairies and hearing, seeing, sensing. It's always been there. So I think the spiritual path for all of us is always there. It's just a question of how much we suppress it or accept it.
It's such a truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
That it is, we're born into this world and we're suffering in those moments, aren't we? Absolutely perfect, divine blueprint, exactly as it is meant to be. And you start to grow up and you start to sort of connect and interact in the world, and your parents start to see that you may hurt yourself or you may be in danger in whatever situation. And it's them unwittingly that actually remove and repress the sovereignty codes,
Yeah.
and almost reprogram that innate nature to accept exactly as you are. And it's a journey, isn't it? Whether you awaken really, really early or it comes later on in your life, it's always that journey of accepting that which you are and actually realizing the divine perfection in that and letting go of the imprints that have been unwittingly projected upon us, because our parents are just trying to do the best they can for us. And that's the earth school, isn't it? It's learning that.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible thing to reflect upon when you actually start to look back and you're able to begin to piece it together. And all you want to do is just be the most authentic version of who you are. And that it just becomes an obsession, doesn't it? Yeah. To just be authentically you,
Yeah.
no holes barred. So it can be a little bit confronting for others when they're sort of faced with that, because for me personally, it's like adjusting the way that I am to make others feel comfortable. And I've always wanted, to a certain extent, to please others, but I've always hated to feel like I'm repressed and I can't actually flow in the way I want to. And it's a conflict that it's like the Taurus Aquarian energy within my sort of astrological makeup. But I just find it fascinating how you spoke about it and how that is what you've come to realize. And it's about acceptance, it's about self-love, and it absolutely is, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think when you were saying, Lisa, obviously when you decided to step back and just go into the corporate world, how when we're not in alignment with the truth of who we are, how that really, like you say, it can make us poorly. It can really rub us up the wrong way, so to speak. I know when I was in the corporate world, I honestly used to sit there at my desk some days and think, is this it? is this my life? Is this what it all comes down to, of me sat here, fingers on the keys, you know, answering to somebody else? And just, I used to wake up in the morning and think, oh, I just don't like this. And it's like, I think that's when, that is those moments, isn't it? Like, it's like, no, I really need to listen to my heart. I know it's going to be difficult. I know it's going to be not really easy to get to the place where I want to be. But the moment we come out of alignment, there's that just discontent, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And if it's, if there'll be catalysts along the way, whether that's connections, relationships, health issues, etc., there will always be that catalyst that will give you the opportunity to see that aligned timeline that you can just jump into and connect to, or where you're holding yourself back. Because we do, like Rachel said, with the imprints that we hold, the conditioning that we have, it's societal, it's coming from family, it's coming from our peer groups, predominantly from ourselves because of the beliefs that we're holding, but that's from conditioning, but also from past life stuff as well. We'll have these imprints around, we can't be seen, we've got to fit in, we've got to assimilate because it's safer being like that. So there's all of this stuff that kind of gets unraveled as you're coming into a space of, like you said, sitting on the keyboard, I just can't do this anymore. Can't be so separated from my core self and outwardly express that in the choices that I make. So it's a big journey. It's a really big journey. But I think, as you said, you just get to the point where you're kind of downloading so much more of who you truly are, and those catalytic moments will come and you go, right, okay, this is it, this is my time now, to just expand and just step into who I truly am. And everything shifts around you very rapidly, so those relationships that you have with people will change because everything's a reflection of the whole. So everything will shift, everything will change, and those doorways will open to enable you to move into where you're supposed to be. But it's the trust, isn't it? It's the believing that this is going to happen, that if I just make this incremental step outside of my comfort zone, if I step into a space of trusting and allowing, that magic will happen for me. But it does.
Yeah.
And that's it. That is the thing, isn't it? It is, again, trust, surrender, step into it, become it.
Yeah.
I know it sounds oversimplistic because it's not that simple, but it can be, can't it?
Yeah.
It can be.
It's those words again, though, isn't it?
Yeah, those sacred words, trust and
surrender.
Trust and surrender. And it's really hard, but it's the embodiment, because the more that you're trusting and surrendering, being in the present moment, not projecting yourself into a future timeline and berating yourself for not achieving what it is that you think you should be doing or who you think you should be. And you just go, okay, I accept and love myself. I'm in the present moment, and it just drops. It just drops away. But it's so hard to get yourself to that space where you go, I surrender it all. I just let go and I allow and I receive, rather than I contract and try and control, because that's how we've always been. That's what's worked for us. That's all we know. So it's very difficult to move into a new, coming from the head to the heart can be a really difficult transition, which I think is where a lot of us feel we're going through these reawakenings, because we're coming out of that mindset and into the heart.
Talk to us about that then, because in the collective, and we've been experiencing this personally, that exact thing, coming out of the head into the heart, holding your true frequency, and actually being woven back. And we were talking about this before, woven back to the beginning of when you awakened, and actually the true frequency of what you connected with is actually what you've always been called to deepen into. Talk to us about your path as regards this sovereignty, your connection to the divine, that sort of collective story.
I think connection to the divine is for me, it's about embodiment. It's about embodying your truth, you know, your divine essence, who you truly are. We're all interwoven, we're all interconnected, and we're all fractal representations of a higher frequency, a source consciousness, however that sits with you. But we're all connected to the divine at all times. We are divine, we're an expression of the divine. You know, it's a core truth. But to really receive that and start to embody that and kind of anchor that as your daily practice, not letting it be a mental thought process, to let it be a feeling process. That is the connection to the divine. And again, it's that receivership, but it's just about walking upon the earth, knowing that you are a sovereign, whole being. You know, it's so simple, like you said, when we kind of look at it, but to do that as a conscious practice on a day-to-day basis is really hard. And I know, you know, for me, there's this point, and I think it's reflected collectively right now. We're going through these shaky foundations where we have these core foundations about lack, or, you know, deservability, or mine's like been coming up this kind of imposter syndrome, and, you know, I'm not worthy, and all of this old stuff, you know, it's just coming up really prominently because I know that I'm rebuilding, and I know that those foundations that I'm rebuilding from have to be very solid, and they have to be very rooted in love, you know, self-love, source love, the frequency of love. It has to come from a space of divine trust. So I'm experiencing these octaves of old belief patterns that I thought I dealt with, but there's deeper roots there. And I think that's a collective reflection. I think there's a lot of us that are going through, whether it's the shaking of the foundations around business, around relationships, around geographical location, all those core fundamental little niggly parts that are quite embedded in, because they've been part of our identity and they've kept us safe. By I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough, I don't expand and I stay in my comfort zone, and that's really cozy and safe. But it isn't kind of aligning me with my soul blueprint or my authentic expression, and it's not allowing me to embody the fullness of who I am. So I think this is what's going on at a deeper collective level. I think we're just really getting down to the nitty gritty of those foundations. And you're seeing it on the, you know, that's the micro, you're seeing it on the macrocosm with the world stage and everything that's going on, all the foundations there shifting, changing, and shaking. But that's kind of the knock on of so many of us doing that deep inner inquiry, that deep inner work, but also coming back into connection with the divine through self-love, through practice of love or embodiment or trust or surrender, or just coming into a space of gratitude. You know, that frequency in itself shifts so much. A bit of a mouthful.
No, but it really resonates, and I think you can relate an awful lot to what Lisa's mirroring about imposter syndrome.
Oh, it plagues me, Lisa. And as I have been, like you were saying, the foundations crumbling, that's been very much for me this year, and rebuilding myself. Like, as I have tried to obviously reestablish who I am and come back to that, you know, place of love and of truth. At the same time, I mean, imposter syndrome has had me turned inside out, hasn't it? I was like completely at a loss, probably at the beginning of September as well. It was like really emotionally, troubled with everything. And that was supposed to be sort of the start of rebuilding. And now things have started to settle because I've really, thankfully, held on to the practices that have, you know, hold me so dearly, and I'm grateful for those practices, you know, to hook onto, to try and get me out of that mindset and come back into the heart and trust in the greater picture that is unfolding. But it's the difficult waters to navigate at the moment. It's turbulent.
Really challenging.
Yeah.
And I think I had similar things when it was like in midsummer, we went to Glastonbury, and for me it was feeling like I had nothing to say, but everything was pouring through me. And I was really pushed to speak of clearly what is my soul lineage, my soul frequency, begin to then try and work out how to weave all the threads of that together and speak authentically, but at the same time feeling like, who are you to, you know, talk about these things? You know, what you're speaking about is not even written about. This is your nurses. This is what is pouring through you from truth codes from God knows where. And I was in a bit of a turmoil, but Helen obviously is a rock for me, and it's vice versa. And I've also got beautiful Dara, my niece, who just says, just share it, speak about it, teach about it, speak about it, teach about it. Just get in a bit of a cycle of doing that. And so that's what I've done to embody, to hold on to, okay, this is who I am. I'm not going to fall into the matrix, so to speak.
Yeah, it is, because we're starting to come to a point where we're holding so much within us that's coming back online. You know, timelines are collectively starting to collapse. So what happens when that collapse happens is that the memories, or the kind of templates that we hold of who we've been in those timelines, are suddenly kind of jumping back in almost. It's like, right, this time is collapsing. It is now time for you to step up and embody and hold all of this. And that includes bringing through all of this wisdom, all of this information. But it can also come from parallel timelines also. So you'll be bringing through and channeling information that, you know, just resonates with the core of who you truly are, because it's coming from a space where you are that person running simultaneously. I know it's going a bit timey, timey-wimey, but you know, that's what's coming through. And the truths that you're speaking of, you know, they exist, but they've not been written about because they're in a dimension slightly out of synchronicity with the one that we've been in. So we're kind of merging and collapsing and bringing together. And that's happening collectively. It's happening planetarily, but it's happening within us first and foremost. So we're collapsing everything and then bringing it all in. And as you said, Rachel, it's just about, you've got to just let it out, because the more we hold it, we bury it and repress it. And like you're saying, Helen, it's that imposter syndrome. You know, it's like, who are you? Or who are you to say this and share this and do this? You know, and the more that we don't share and don't speak authentically and don't share our truth and just put it out there for the sheer joy of expressing whatever it is, we're all channels. Everybody's a channel, whether you do it through art, through music, through creativity, through the digital world. You know, there's people making amazing things digitally, websites, etc. Whether you're a nurse or a doctor, it doesn't matter. You're all channels. You're all bringing something through that is just so beautiful and a unique reflection of who you are, to uplift and support everybody around you. So it's kind of this point you get to where you think, well, okay, I'm a reflection of the divine consciousness that is source. I'm part of the creation, and everything is a creation. I'm part of it, it's part of me. So who am I to sit there and say I'm not good enough? Who am I to sit there and say I'm unworthy of just being and sharing my truth? Because essentially we're all part of divine consciousness, and that divine consciousness exists within each and every one of us. It's that flame within our hearts, you know, it's the ignition of our soul. And if we go into a space of saying I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, you know, all of the old conditioning that we're battling through, we're kind of denying and separating ourselves from that divine flow, and we're separating ourselves from others. You know, that's what I'm starting to realize, that actually by going into these programs and patterns which we hold, and they're coming up, they need to come up because we need to build those new foundations. But it's just coming back to the truth of, well, who am I to reject and separate myself from divine consciousness? Who am I to say that I know better by saying that I don't deserve and I'm unworthy and I'm not good enough? You know, really, it's a disservice, you know, to the truth of who you really are and to the embodiment and of being here at this time, you know, as a sacred soul in a physical vessel. So that's the consciousness I'm kind of aware of, but in embodying that and really anchoring that truth is really difficult right now.
Yeah.
September has been horrendous. It's been really hard work. You know, I was thinking, right, we're going to go for the equinox and it'll all be amazing. And it is getting easier, but September's been, personally for me, one of the hardest months for years and years and years. So it's a relief in a way that you're saying, oh, it has been really tough, because you kind of start to think, what's wrong with me?
You can feel so alone, can't you?
Yeah,
Sometimes it can
yeah,
feel, and even when you're sharing things or you're following on social media, sometimes your blinkers are on and you miss that, and you're so engrossed in what is rising and crumbling for
yeah,
you. So yeah, it's for me, and to hear your story, it's like, yeah, because September's been difficult. It like
yeah,
for me, and like I said for you, and
Mm.
it's just
yeah.
hear somebody else talking about it. It's not that we want to see anybody else struggling.
No,
It's
but
reassuring, isn't
it
it?
is reassuring. Yeah, September's been, the frequency and the energy has been so hard to align with, because it's shifting really, really quickly. You can get up in the morning, do your practices, be like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit kind of more equilibrium. And within a couple of hours, there'll be some kind of crazy solar flare, and you're like,
Yeah.
just back in it again. So I think we're learning how to balance and anchor within ourselves, because the external energies, collective, planetarily, are all quite chaotic right now. And I think it's teaching us to come back to, as you were speaking of earlier, practices, daily practices that really honor who we are and how we keep our kind of balance, you know, groundedness in amongst all of this kind of crazy, chaotic energy. But September has been particularly intense. I think it's just been the month where a lot has come to the surface, a lot collectively. It's kind of like I've been seeing the kind of clearing of these old layers, these kind of old grids. I think there's just such a deep clearing, because each time we're clearing and releasing and moving into new levels of conscious awareness, every individual is experiencing that, because it's a collective process, but we are co-creating that collective energy also. So I think there's just a lot of people are being pushed quite a lot by financial constraints, lots of different circumstances, and it's pushing them into new states of awareness and being, those catalyst moments. And I think it's reflected in this collective energy, but it's like elastic band that's just like pinging and then coming back. It's been so intense.
It has, and it is. It's that expansion and contraction on such a rapid level. It's
Yeah.
like you're holding your breath. You can't breathe into it because it's just like so manic, and it's just like, hey, can I just have a couple of days off, please?
Yeah.
Just recalibrate, because this is a little bit crazy. But you say, Lisa, that through this, obviously, you've had your daily practices that support you. So tell us a little bit about your daily practices. You know, maybe some advice for our listeners of what they could maybe weave in to support themselves.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've changed everything up because I'm in this phase of rebuilding. And before, I used to kind of get up and do some Tai Chi or Qigong and just really ground. And I would, first thing in the morning, I kind of wake up and I smile, because it's just creating that energy. It's like, right, I'm grateful to be in my body. You know, something that you can do really quickly. You wake up, you smile, you just think, I'm grateful to be in my body. I'm grateful for the way that the day is going to unfold. You know, just kind of hand on heart and gratitude. And then I used to go into a Qigong practice, and I've actually stopped and gone into more of an intense, quite physical workout in the mornings, because the energy has been so intense. I've needed to kind of get those endorphins going, but I've needed to kind of discharge energy as well. I've noticed I've been kind of, energy has been quite stagnant in my body. So I've been changing my practices, but it's now I'm going into, it's always physical movement of some sort. Before it was like gentle Tai Chi, Qigong. Now it's quite a bit of an intense workout. And then I go into Qigong and I just do that as my kind of cool down almost. But that's the core. Having a morning routine for me gives me structure and stability. So no matter how anxious I might feel when I wake up, no matter how wobbly the energy feels, I just know there's something that I'm doing that is just bringing me back into my body, first and foremost, giving me that connection to my body. And I tend to find going, whether it's slow movement or more intense movement, I start to become more aware of what's feeling tense, what's feeling awkward, what I'm holding in my energy centers. So for me, the daily practice is first and foremost the gratitude practice, smiling, the gratitude, and then movement. And I tend to ground through the movement, but if I'm still not feeling 100%, I will ground. I'll just go outside and just ground, just visualize the roots coming from the center of my feet into the earth, and just hands on my heart, and just breathing and connecting and visualizing those roots deep into Mother Earth, and just really coming back to the present and feeling that connection, and visualizing myself as a tree connected to the heavens and grounded into the earth, just to give myself a bit more of an energetic structure if I'm still feeling a bit wonky. So it's the morning practice for me. And then when I go to bed at night, I'm just going into meditation before I go into bed, because it's just, I need to kind of decompress and just come back to my connection. So it's just for me, it's just a breathing in and out practice and meditation. But in between, I think when I'm working, you're kind of in a different space. You're tuning in and you're creating sacred space. And when I step into service, all of that dissipates. It's kind of like you can hold that frequency when you're in service, because it's not about you. You're getting out of the way and you're just opening your heart and you're in service. You have your safe practices. But I think when it's personal, when it's you, it's different. So it's just a conscious awareness of being kind to myself. I'm really starting my practice now at this moment is about being kind to myself. So when I'm getting all these imposter syndrome stuff and all this unworthiness coming up, I'm really consciously reframing those thoughts, my internal dialogue. So that might help somebody. The minute you're starting to get these thoughts, it's just like, oh, why did I do that? Or I'm not good enough, or X, Y, Z. You just, yes, I am. It's just reaffirming, and it's retraining those old stories to be new stories that hold the frequency of self-love. So that's a conscious practice that I'm really aware of at the moment. But I would say meditation, grounding, movement, if you're physically able, movement is important. I can remember there was a time in 2012 and lost the ability to walk and sit up. And I could move my upper body, but not my lower body. So I had to have surgeries and everything was corrected. It was fine. It was a long journey, but I was aware that I couldn't move in the way that I was used to. So I was really building up energy. I was kind of feeling stuck and trapped in my own body, but also stuck and trapped energetically. So I had to kind of start to work on more conscious visualization techniques, and kind of imagine the energy moving and work in a more conscious way. Now I'm grateful to be able to work energy through my body in the way that I am through movement. But if there is restriction on movement, then it's just about visualizing energy and visualizing moving energy. And you can actually visualize it coming down through the body from your higher aspect or from source, a light, and you can just move it through each area of your body, through your energy centers, through your arms. You can visualize energy flowing and moving like water. So they're practices that I would do back then, but now I'm more able physically to work with energy and move it in that way. So I think it's just grounding, meditation, energy clearing, really, really important at the moment, because energy is quite dense. So energy clearing practices, personally working with the violet flame energy. So just calling on the violet flame and just running the violet flame through the body and through the energy centers. So it's more of a visualization and meditation. And I'm finding unplugging from social media a lot more, stepping away, because my business is predominantly social media, but I'm finding it's really difficult to be on there at an energetic level. And that's my nudge to pull back, to kind of pull back and be really strict about the amount of time that I'm spending on the internet, on my phone, just really pulling everything back and going back to basics journaling. I've started journaling again, which I haven't been doing. So my daily practice has really changed this month, but it is those key things: energy, hygiene, grounding, meditation, and just reframing those thoughts, just reframing them, because we don't realize how many of those old stories come up in our thought process on a daily basis. And when I started to be conscious of reframing them, I was amazed how often the parental voice I was using was really critical. So I was thinking, actually, how many times am I putting myself down, bringing my frequency down just through the internal dialogue that I have? So that's been a big practice lately. And they're all things that that you can do rapidly with the violet flame if you need to. And they're things that you're not having to spend a fortune on. They're things that you can do for yourself. It's all about that self-empowerment. When we're supporting or guiding or mentoring or teaching or sharing with others, it's all about the self-empowerment. It's about enabling people to work with energy a way that empowers them, that they can do.
Totally.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you've said is what we're going to ask you next. What advice have you got for people on how to deepen their connection, how to sort of weave this into their everyday?
Yeah, and I think what is lovely is that you said obviously recently it's changed quite differently, your daily practice, and I think that's the other thing as well, is just to know that you can change it. I think some people get stuck in a rut, and sometimes it's really paramount for us to actually change our daily practices, because as the energy changes and so much is shifting, we have to adapt to that. And I love the way as well, like when you're saying, like with your imposter syndrome and and coming into your daily practice as well, the power of affirmation. And that's one of the things that we love what you do on social media, Lisa, because you have your daily affirmations and they're really powerful. So really highly recommend our listeners to head over, follow Lisa. All the links will be below, but especially for those affirmations, because it's how we speak to ourselves. It's so important.
Also, what I find really potent about what you do is that you are constantly blessing and setting the space of what you are transmitting out there. And I feel like that is so important for anybody who's serving up anything out on the World Wide Web. It's so important that you have the space set, whether it is that's in simple terms as you're setting an intention of what you want to create and it comes from the heart, or whether it is more ritualistic and witchy in nature. It's whatever floats your boat, but it's so important, isn't it?
It's hugely important, because social media is quite sticky and icky. It just generally is, because the varying amounts of information and energy out there. But if you choose to be consciously on there and you choose to be consciously sharing, then I think there's a collective and individual responsibility to infuse everything that you create with a positive intention, with integrity, authenticity, and with light, to create a safe space for somebody who may be having a really grotty day, who's just scrolling through incessant stuff on social media. If they happen to come upon your page, it's just to think that's a bit of a healing temple for somebody to just come and just have a bit of a scroll where there isn't any expectation other than them to feel good, and to really put that energy out into the ethers, into the internet. We really need to, because it's a medium that's great for communication. It's a channel in itself. It's got its own blueprint. We're conscious creators, so it's about creating consciously and putting that really positive vibration and intention out there. And I think the way all that we create is a reflection and a blueprint. When businesses have a blueprint, what we create is birth from the heart. So it has that impression, it's part of you. So any kind of work, it's about creating the most sacred space and safest place and highest light space for the connection. So I think with the readings, a lot of the sessions that I do, the big part in the morning is creating the sacred space. It's kind of intentional. It's having the roses, their incense. It's really creating the vibration for the deepest soul connection to come through, and making sure the space is energetically safe. That's a key thing. And I think it's taken years to step into working in the way that I did. It took a long time to do that because I needed to learn how to set up sacred space. And until I really felt confident with that, I wasn't going to create those offerings. It was a real conscious thing that creating sacred space, the practices when you're working with others, when you're working with energy, it's so important to do it with the utmost respect and in a space of integrity, and hold that space in a most safe way that you can. And I think the internet and social media is an extension of that, the work that you do, because you're putting your intention, your energy out there. So you want it to reflect something beautiful, something sacred, and something safe energetically for someone to hang out and be. It's almost like, I always think social media is like a shop window. It's like a shop that you have, because really you're advertising your business there. So if somebody came into your shop, you would want them to walk in and feel held, loved, safe, and just feel uplifted. And it's exactly the same with your social media. So it's just those conscious, and that's again intention. You create a post, you just put the intention into it. I hold the intention for this post to hold the highest light, for it to just embody divine truth, divine frequency, whatever terminology works. And just when I post, I just visualize, just love flowing through. And these things only take a few seconds. But I think with readings and offerings, and it's different. I think there's more time to build and create that sanctuary. I always think of it as a temple, and create that crystalline light, because it's so important when you're connecting and channeling energy, just to have that really beautiful space.
For sure.
Well said, Lisa.
Yeah.
Well said. And much needed. People need to really just let that land, because it is so crucial. Because social media has such power.
Yeah.
And it needs to be used for the greater good of all. So yeah.
For sure.
Brilliant.
So we like to ask all our guests this question, don't we?
Yes. So we always like to finish with, if you could go back, Lisa, and give your awakening self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Amazing question. Love yourself. Love yourself. Yeah. Because if you love yourself, you're not in doubt, and then you're not separating layers of yourself or projecting your unhealed stuff outwards. If you love yourself, you're in a balanced, neutral space of embodiment and divine grace. So yeah, love yourself would be the advice. And I'm still taking that on board.
Breathe in your wisdom, because that has given me goosebumps.
That
I just
came
felt,
straight from the heart.
yeah, it absolutely did. You could just feel it all. Yeah, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Honestly, it has been glorious. We could talk to you for hours. Questions just pour in from upstairs for you. So it has been an honor to get you on the first time. We cannot wait to invite you back again. We could get really geeky and go down any channel. We could go quantum.
Let's do it. Setting the intention, that's getting those quantum highways. Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely incredible, so insightful, filled with so much wisdom. All of Lisa's links are below this video on YouTube and below our podcast. Please go and check her out. She's an absolute diamond, and we just thank you so much for being in our temple today.
Oh, thank you. It's been a really beautiful experience. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So thank you. Thank you.